Hello everyone, and welcome to our onQ Ransomware Edition webcast. My name is Darren Pendergraft. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Quorum, and it's my pleasure to be your host today. Joining me on the webcast is Mr. Gabe Gamble, who's VP of Technical Services and Infrastructure. And also on the webcast today is Mr. Jason Snook, Solution Architect. To give you some context for how the idea for this product came about, really all you have to do is look at what's happening in the news today. The situation with ransomware is currently one of the biggest problems that IT experts face. As we look at the metrics and as you read the news and as you listen to the security experts, what you realize is that ransomware attacks are becoming more frequent and they're becoming more aggressive. The other thing that we're seeing about ransomware attacks is the attack vectors are constantly changing. That means that the criminal elements behind these attacks are getting very creative at figuring out how they can use malware and ransomware in particular to extort money out of businesses. Now, the safest strategy to take when thinking about and preparing for and protecting your business against malware is to assume that prevention will eventually fail and to figure out if you do have a malware and specifically a ransomware attack, what would you do about it, right? So the guidance that we're being given is plan for a failure, understand how you would recover those servers, understand how you might get them cleaned up and back into production. And that's really what we're here to talk to you about today. One of the other bits of advice we're hearing from law enforcement is don't pay the ransom. There have been several stories where customers have been attacked, servers have been locked up, data has been held hostage, and they had no good way of getting those servers back. So they actually got online, got some Bitcoin, and paid the attackers, only to find out that the attackers really had no interest in releasing their data. So if you're not going to pay the ransom, you really need a strong, secure backup and recovery system that can get your servers back online in the quickest way possible. And so to explain to you how Quorum helps to help you with that, I'm going to bring Mr. Gabriel Gamble into the conversation.
Thanks a lot, Darren. Hi, everybody. I'm Gabriel Gamble. What we're going to talk about today is the Ransomware Edition, and what it specifically does is sets up an environment where all of your machines are protected so that when you have, or if and when you have a ransomware event, recovery is not only a couple of clicks away, it's an easy transition back to your production environment. So that's what we're going to talk about. What the onQ does is it takes snapshots of your protected servers at a regular interval, whatever you deem necessary, hourly, daily, whatever, and it puts it into a repository of data on the onQ. From there, we create virtual machines that we then keep updated with each snapshot we take. So you have an instant recoverable base for every snapshot in time for your server. So if you got infected yesterday, you could roll back to 2 days ago and bring that server up instantly to get around the ransomware issue. We also have file level recovery. So if you just wanted to restore a share or get those files back, all of that is easily accessible to you from the Ransomware Edition onQ. And we've designed it so that every snapshot is made ready to run. So going back before is really, really simple. If we can go to the next slide. So what's in the Ransomware Box? What we do in the onQ Ransomware Edition is we've set up a box to protect about 15 servers. It has 22 terabytes of storage, an 8-core processor, 64 gigs of RAM. And basically that processor and RAM is designed to basically run 1 to 2 recovery nodes or recovered servers if you have a ransomware attack. And so 98% of all ransomware episodes attack a single drive or a single server. And so this really circumvents every ransomware attack. So if your antivirus breaks down or your firewall has a problem or something like that, whatever you're doing to monitor and protect yourself from ransomware, this will still be able to recover you and get you back up and running. You'll notice the next line I have is 25,000 IOPS. We have a layer 2 cache, an NVMe cache in there that gives us a tremendous amount of speed so that we can really approach your production speeds for your network. So when you have to recover that server, you're not running on a slow piece of hardware, you're running on something close to your production speed so that your users don't get impacted by this outage. Obviously, we have 10 gig networking inside, and we're taking application consistent snapshots. And that's really important. What we do is we leverage VSS. So basically, what we mean by application consistent is your SQL, your Exchange, those kind of servers that are VSS compliant don't need a second step of recovery to get the databases up and running. We can just start the machine and go. And that's a really important feature because a lot of your other backup solutions that are on the market will fail at this point because once you've recovered the snapshot back to your server, you then have to do a second step of recovery to get your mailbox or your databases into a state where they can be opened. So snapshot consistent, application consistent backups is a very important feature of that. Next slide. So what we've done with this, these are the benefits of what you get. You get one-click recovery for your infected server from any point in time that we have a snapshot for on the onQ. So we take snapshots. We usually size your boxes to have about 30 days of snapshots, but obviously these are preset sizes in the Ransomware Edition. So you have, however much storage you have, you can store snapshots for that long to roll back to should you have a ransomware episode. It's very simple to deploy. We have both agent and agentless deployment methods if you're on VMware. We can actually support physical machines, virtual machines on any hypervisor, be it on VMware, Hyper-V, Zen Server, KVM, Parallels, whatever you're running. It doesn't matter to us. We're very agnostic to your environment. In fact, we can actually coexist with other protection providers. So if you have a different backup solution in place or you're using something else, that doesn't phase us at all. We just have to make sure we're taking snapshots at a different time from them taking snapshots so that we don't step on each other. But absolutely, we can coexist with your other solutions so that you're not having to do a whole rip and replace. You can get the ransomware features, get it in your environment quickly and easily. We don't rely on your DNS or your Active Directory. We're not connected into that because we have to assume as a ransomware product or as a disaster recovery product that if your DNS or your Active Directory is what went down, we need to be able to bring it up and function. The onQ needs to function no matter what. So we stay separate from your environment. And really that gives us a minimal attack vector, makes us almost impervious to infection. I'm sure that someone could design a ransomware to attack us directly, but the chances of that happening are incredibly low. Authentication is isolated. We're running on Linux, not on a Windows server. All of these things, we're already using encryption. We're already having, local firewalls installed and all the security features that you would expect from a PCI grade product. So even if we back up infected files from early, or get infected files from your server onto our onQ, they're still isolated within their snapshot. That data can't infect previous snapshots to make the problem worse. So our ability to recover backwards in time is still there, and that's the key feature, and that's what you really need to consider when you're looking at a recovery product, because you could have ransomware that's been infecting your machine for 4 or 5 days until you realize that it's a problem, and you need to roll back to 4 days ago. Well, recovering that server on other products is really slow and laborious. But we can actually just hit a drop down, pick 4 days ago, start that server up, and you're back to running. That's really the benefits of how you get to where you are. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Great. The next thing is, I wanted to take a minute and explain how the Ransomware Edition differs from our full onQ product. So the Ransomware Edition gives you that first bullet point, that local high availability, so that if you have a server go down, you can recover. But with our full suite, we even improved that local high availability standard because we can actually bring up all of your servers. So a lot of our customers will have VM environments running on a SAN. Well, if their SAN goes down, they have multiple machines that fail. So we can actually recover your whole environment and run all of it off of our full-fledged onQ products. So that's the first bullet point. We also have disaster recovery capabilities. We can put a second appliance at another location, or we have our cloud solution here in the UK, which is a PCI compliant purpose-built cloud solution. So that gives you the full DR capabilities that if you lost the main site due to fire, flood, or we've had customers that have had to fail over because their sprinklers went off in their building. Those type of things affect customers every day. And so being able to recover to a remote site or to the cloud is really critical. And then the next piece is the full test network. So in the ransomware product, we have a test network, but because we've kind of limited the power of the appliance with processor and memory, you can only bring up a couple of nodes to do testing. But with our full appliances and our full suite of products, you can actually test every server in your environment and do a full DR test without affecting your production environment. Everything has encryption at rest and in transit, both our ransomware product and our full-fledged product. So that's a feature in both suites. And then our ability to restore files, mail, SQL, and SharePoint actually exists in both products, but with the added benefit in the full-fledged products that you can recover from the DR site as well as the local site. And then, of course, in both suites, you got to be able to recover back to your production network. So full and incremental BMR exists both in the ransomware product and in the onQ full suite. But again, in the full suite, you can do it from the DR site as well as the local site. So you have a full range of features available both in ransomware and in our full-fledged onQ products to give you peace of mind that if you have a ransomware event or a disaster, you can recover. Okay, next slide. And I think we're going to pass it over to Jason. Jason, if you can take us through the anatomy of an attack.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gabe. Yeah, very quickly, talking about the anatomy of a ransomware attack. It's pretty straightforward. The way that ransomware can get in, it's various. It could be macro-enabled Excel. It could be tricked into thinking that you're doing a Windows update. It could be multiple various ways that ransomware can get inside. The main, essentially, the main process that once it gets inside, exploit kit. It's all about running a macro or getting that person to be tricked into installing an exploit kit. Once that kit's installed, it's time to contact the command and control center. This is the time to go out and report to the mothership to say, hey, I've got another a device that's ready to process. Now, here's the deal. Encryption of assets. Ideally, what ransomware is looking for, it's looking for a UNC path. If you've got a map drive, it's the most effective way of getting you to pay the ransom is to lock the files that you, the end user, would want to use. And so we're talking about a business here, so we're talking about your standard UNC path drives. Now, of course, ransomware is also designed to lock local, commonly used local drives, but more often than not, it's going to go out and search your network for UNC paths that the PC knows about, and then go out and lock them. So if you, the user, are compromised, every single file that you have the ability to write potentially is a target for ransomware to lock and prevent anyone else from using it. Now, from that point on, it's going to leave some traces. Ransomware is going to leave some traces, and that traces comes in the form of, we've seen it as simple as the old how to decrypt.htm. We've also seen it as a little add-on malicious thing where it actually changes the background of the end user. It says with the decrypt or the ransom text, and inside the ransom text it's essentially going to say, you've been compromised, all your files are locked. If you want them, pay this amount in Bitcoin to this particular dark web address. So at that point, you have a choice, and that is where we're going to step in. You get all the way to the point where you, the company, or you, the user, are looking at the ransom demand. What do you do next? Well, from the ransomware point of view, it leaves. It's going to either hide itself, it's going to go dormant. The actual impact or the actual malware that triggered this event is going to sit there and it's going to go dormant. So this is why it is incredibly important that arrow right before ransom demand and gone, you take a few key steps before you, the admin, you, the person who's responsible for the IT resources in your company, jumps into recovery mode. So go ahead, Darren. Let's jump to the next slide, please. So let's walk through a very common playbook. Okay, so you come into the office, you realize that you are compromised. You've got, Sally in accounting comes to you and says, I'm so sorry. I think I did something bad, and now I can't access any of my files in the accounting directory. And sure enough, you go and do your research, and you realize that one of your UNC paths is completely locked, and there's an extra file in there, and that little devious file is the how to decrypt.htm. So your playbook is to figure out, A, what is the impact, what is the scope of this compromise, and B, point blank, how do I get back up and running? We're going to take off the table immediately ever the thought of actually paying the ransom. And so your very first step as the administrator, disconnect that server, get the network connection disconnected. If it's a virtual machine, just disconnect the network. We just want to put that server onto its island, and we're going to deal with it later. Now, the next thing is to check the environment. You want to find out the scope. It is extremely easy to say, okay, I have removed the server from my environment. Now let's jump into recovery mode. We're not quite there yet. You want to make sure that every single server in your environment has not been compromised. Well, how do you do this? You do a visual inspection. You can go to your other UNC paths and see, has that malware jumped from one path to another or one file server to another? Has it encrypted system files? We've seen variants of ransomware that are now specifically targeting not just UNC paths, but they're going to go out and target. You remember the old admin shares, the $ shares for Windows. They're still out there, and if you, the administrator, for whatever reason, had access to these, it's going to go out and it's going to attempt to lock system files. There's even one out there that it attempts to lock VMDK files. So imagine an entire operating system being locked, being unable to actually operate until you decrypt the files. So you want to go out there and check the environment to find out the scope. Is it just that one path, that one file server, or is it many? One way you can do this is you can search your network for common files like server, crypt, enigma, lock. I put in a URL here, but there's various tools out there as well that will go out and very quickly scan your environment for known variants of ransomware. Now, here's the fun part, step 3. Again, right before you're ready to jump into recovery mode, you've got to get patient 0 out of the loop. That is where the dormant activator is. That is where Sally in accounting, Mary in accounting, whatever her name is, that's where she's going to take a paid vacation, and you're going to send her home. One way that we have found to find patient 0 is actually to look at the how to decrypt.htm or look at any one of the files and look at the metadata. Now, there are various tools out on the market that will do this for you. You can do it the down and dirty way, the very easy way. Look at the metadata of that new file in that share. That metadata will point you back to the patient 0. You can do what's called a reverse GUID lookup, and that will go out and tell you exactly who the offender is. And again, patient 0, you don't want to have any business with that person. So get them off the network, power it down, put that over to the side and say, okay, I'm going to deal with that person later. You want to avoid that whack-a-mole approach. Once we jump into recovery mode, last thing you want to do is have to deal with a compromised machine again, because ransomware has sat there and become dormant for a while. So disconnect patient 0. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now it's the fun part. You, the administrator, are going to become the superhero of the office. It's time to recover. So you determine your scope. Now in Quorum's world, if you've got Quorum RE on hand, now what your path to getting back to production is pretty simple. You're going to power up the recovery node from a known good point in time. Now, how do we find that? What if you backed up bad data? Let's say you're doing snapshots every hour, and you have a few bad snapshots in there that actually has compromised data. Well, with our system, you can power up the offended machine into a segmented test network and do your visual inspection to say, has it been locked was it locked at 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m., whatever the case is. Find the point in time that you need to go back to, because with our system, you can boot a recovery node. Remember, that recovery node is a VM clone. It's got the same IP, it's got the entire data set. You can boot it from any point in your snapshot history. So with this particular case, boot it until you find that known good state. Let's say you determine, okay, Monday at 7 a.m., we were not compromised. That is the version that you run, that you introduce to your network. And it's extremely simple. The playbook for us is to unlock the dashboard, click on the button that represents the server you need to bring back online, and it will now be running on the Quorum appliance. It's that easy. We're not asking you to do a file level restore. We're not asking you to pull files from a cloud resource. We're not going to suggest that you rebuild a file server and start doing that giant file level restore of your entire file structure. We're saying boot the recovery node from any point in time, and as long as that server takes the boot up, that is your downtime. That is the time it's going to take you to recover. So at this point, the file server, your previously compromised server, is now running on the Quorum RE appliance, recovery node, or Ransomware Edition appliance. It's now running, again, as Gabe said, we'd leverage NVMe cache, so it's running performance-wise probably as good as it did in production, or even better. It's literally running at 25,000 IOPS. So at this point, you tell the users, hey, we had an issue. I've determined the scope. I got patient zero offline, but we're back up and running. We'll never pay that ransom. And now you jump into the cleaning mode. And there's a few different ways you can do this, okay? So users are up and running. Users are able to access the server as needed. Our appliance continues to back up that particular VM as it's running on the appliance. It's a very important note. It's continually being protected. So now you, the administrator, it's time to figure out how you're going to clean. Well, patient zero is pretty easy to clean. I've always called it nuke and pave. You just put a new OS on it, or put a new image on it, and move on. There's no, in my world of desktop support, there's really no reason to try and scrub and find out how to eradicate that particular ransomware. Just put a new OS on it and move on. Now, for your file server that was compromised, what do you do? How do you actually get that off of there? And now there are plenty of tools that you can use to do that deep clean, to scrub out any of the compromised files. But there's a different way of doing it. Darren, let's go to the next page, please. Now, what you can do with the Quorum solution, the onQ solution, is you can do an incremental BMR. Now, the beauty of an incremental BMR is, let's say your file server was compromised at 9 a.m. on a Monday. With our solution, you can boot that production machine from our ISO image and recover it to a previously known good state and time. So you can actually fix the ransomware issue on that file server by making that server look like a previous version. You do this, again, it's called failback or incremental BMR. You do this while the users are still running or still accessing the VM clone on the Quorum appliance. So again, you're looking at no downtime for users, and you, the administrator, you're not looking at nights and weekends. You're looking at doing this during working hours. You can actually repair that impacted machine by doing our BMR process. It's all ISO based. It's designed to fail back to either the same or dissimilar hardware, either the same or dissimilar hypervisor. So going above and beyond ransomware, you can use our solution to actually be a migration tool. You can deploy servers from backup data to dissimilar hardware and dissimilar hypervisors. So it just adds to the value of the overall product. So that's the playbook. I tried to make it as clean as possible, but that in the Quorum world of doing things, this onQ Ransomware Edition is designed to sit next to your existing backup provider. So if you can't get back up and running with just a couple clicks from a known good state and then run on cache speeds, then I definitely think it's time to look at the onQ RE Edition.
All right, Jason. Well, thank you very much. appreciate you kind of taking us through that recovery process. To kind of just wrap things up, I wanted to just kind of summarize kind of some of the key points that we've gone through in this presentation. So, we started off with a very large-scale ransomware epidemic that we all know is going to get worse before it gets better. The good news about all of this is you don't have to pay the ransom. That onQ RE provides you with a secure, fast recovery option that could really, as Jason said, make you the superhero of your office. You don't have to pay the ransom. You don't have to go through a very lengthy process, as Jason described. Ransom RE, onQ RE, that is, can get you back up and running in minutes. So with that, we actually had a few questions come in, and I'd like to invite the audience to enter any questions you have into the question console. Feel free to type in your questions, and we will take a few questions. And certainly if you have some things that you're interested in and we don't get to your question, we will definitely follow up with you and make sure that we get your questions answered if we don't answer them on this webcast. So let me take just a moment here and take a look at some of the questions. Okay, so let's see. So one of the questions we have is, does onQ back up virtual machines as well as physical servers? It's a good question. So who would like to take that? Gabe, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Absolutely. We back up virtual machines as well as physical servers. Anything from Windows 2003, Service Pack 2, all the way up to the current release. And then various Red Hat builds of Linux, CentOS, and Oracle Enterprise Linux, those kind of things. All do fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Jason, here's one for you. Have you had anybody actually recover from a ransomware situation? Or Gabe, I think maybe you said you had a story about this. Do you want to handle this one as well?
Sure. Yeah, we have. We've had several customers, one of which called us the other day just to thank us. And we're like, okay, why are you calling? And he said, well, I had ransomware about 2 weeks ago, and I was able to recover to the onQ server and keep going until I could fix the box and recover the data. But, it's the first time that I've had a product that I've bought where what you guys advertised to me actually did exactly what I wanted. It just recovered the server and I was up and running, and my users actually never even knew because it happened on a Sunday that I had ransomware. So I was able to get everything back to golden and didn't have a blip with my production environment at all. And we're like, well, that's great. So it was a great conversation because so rarely do people call into support without a problem. And so it was very funny for us to sit on the other side of the fence going, hey, no problem. We're glad we could help. We've had several customers call in with ransomware. We've had customers that don't have our product call in with ransomware that we've actually ended up making sales from it because we've helped them get their stuff running, and they know our support is super qualified to help them. And so those conversations actually led into sales, coincidentally. But we've had quite a few come through.
Fantastic. Okay. Another question. This one's a little bit more of an architectural question. Can onQ be placed at a DR site, or does it have to be in the same location as the server farm?
That's a great question. The Ransomware Edition is designed for local connectivity. For a DR site, what we would normally do is put one locally so that you have locally running servers should you need them for high availability needs, and then we would put another server at a remote location or in our cloud. That's the best way to handle those type of scenarios because most issues you have are local, and you want something local to be able to recover to. We do have some scenarios where if they have high-speed bandwidth or something that they can go direct to our cloud or direct to a remote location, but those are the outliers normally. We try to tend to make people aware that if they put it remotely, when it comes up and runs as a server, they're all accessing it remotely. So you want to have that bandwidth and that speed.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Jason, this one's for you. This one came in thinking about the recovery process. The question is, if the recovery node is still in use, oh, sorry, let me back up. Restore process steps 2 and 3. So this is in reference to kind of your flow of how the recovery process would go. If the recovery node is still in use, will you not be missing changes that have happened since the last snapshot? So can you kind of go back through that a little bit and talk about, I think the question really is a concern about will data be missed, changes be missed, during that process?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. So the way that you avoid any sort of data loss or make sure that the recovery node that's running on a Quorum appliance and your production server that you're about to fail back to, the way that you make sure that they're both completely in sync, here's how you do it. You would do your BMR process during the day. BMR meaning bare metal restore. You'll fix that production machine based on a previous snapshot. Let's say, for example, it's noon. You're going to start your BMR process. You're going to start it from a noon backup. Okay, it might take an hour or so to move all the changes over from to do that BMR process. So now you're to a point where the next time you do another incremental BMR, and this is where you do a maintenance window, you tell everyone, okay, everyone, from 6 p.m. until 6:30 p.m., you're not going to have access to that server. At 6 p.m., you take one final snapshot of the recovery node running on the Quorum appliance. You then do an incremental BMR from that final snapshot to the production machine, turn off the recovery node, turn on the production machine. That's how you get back up and running. There's no dark science behind or magic behind the curtain, so to speak. It's literally, you're going to do an incremental BMR. You're going to do one final incremental BMR at the end of the day when no one else has been touching or making transactions to that server. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, the way I like to explain it is, if you had a 2 terabyte server, that's going to take hours to recover. But with that last incremental snapshot, like Jason pointed out, it's only like a half-hour downtime window that you can now schedule and control versus trying to recover that whole 2 terabyte or 4 terabyte or whatever server, and making that outage much more dramatic.
Okay. All right. Great. Jason, I think something you said may have surprised one of our listeners, because the question is, I have other backup products. It sounded like you said this can run alongside. So is this a replacement for my backup, or is this something that can be used in conjunction with other backup products?
Yeah, I mean, our standard onQ offering has always been something that it's typically a replacement for backup solutions, because it really lends itself well to being fast and total recovery. Now, with that being said, you can by all means put the onQ Ransomware Edition right beside another backup vendor. So again, if you're not completely happy and satisfied with what your current recovery or backup vendor is doing for you, this can sit beside it. You can take backups, let's say, Semantic Backup Exec. You can still take backups using Backup Exec, and then create an alternate backup window to take the very fast snapshots to the onQ. So without a doubt, you can have dual backup solutions. We can sit right beside, all the known vendors, from Symantec to Veeam to Commvault. We can definitely sit right beside them. You're going to want to do a little due diligence to make sure that you're not hammering your server asking for backups, at the same time from two different vendors for sure. But yeah, by all means, we can sit right beside it. And again, the design of our solution is such that it's there to be a completely separate backup and recovery solution. We've got everything's built in. It is literally data protection in a box, from the hardware all the way up to the ability to spin up those VM clones. Hypervisor is included, licensing is included. It's got its own network stack, obviously has its own compute. So it's sharing realistically nothing but power with the rest of your servers and your infrastructure. Okay,
great. Gabe, I think this one's for you. Thinking about when you're running from an onQ RE appliance, you made the claim that the performance was good. Can you talk a little bit about that and explain what you mean by that?
Sure. The onQ has an NVMe card in it, which is a high-speed SSD running on the PCI bus, and it's at a 400 gig NVMe. This allows us to get an IOPS speed for disk access far beyond what you're going to get with any kind of spinning disk or even a normal SSD connectivity. And so because of that, and because of the architecture that we use with our file system and such, we can actually get production server workload speeds running across all of our appliances without having to do a production SAN type environment and cost. So we get a 25,000 IOPS speed, which is pretty close to what most customers are having with a high-end SAN today. If they're not having a full flash SAN, we're pretty close to that speed, and so we give those customers that peace of mind that they're going to run for many customers faster than they have in their production environment when they're running on the onQ.
Okay. Gentlemen, it looks like we had a follow-up. When using dual backup methods, how would it affect log truncation, for example, in Exchange?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Go ahead.
Okay. What we do is so VSS has two modes in it. It has copy mode and normal mode. And most backup software leverages that normal mode to take its incremental backups. And so that's what controls your transaction logs and all of that stuff. We have a switch that you can turn on in the portal that you can turn us into copy mode. So what we do is we still leverage VSS. We don't want to take backups at the same time, but we don't step on their log process of what, when they took their last backup and whatnot. So we stay separate from that. So we don't end up truncating your logs. We don't end up resetting any of the backup attributes so that the file thinks it was backed up. We're just basically in a copy mode so that we can coexist with the other backup software, and we can still get the snapshot onto the onQ to update that recovery node.
All right, fantastic. Okay, well, it looks like those are all the questions for today. So I want to thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for delivering the presentation today. Thank you for walking us through onQ Ransomware Edition, and also for talking a bit about how to recover from a ransomware attack. I want to thank the audience for the participation. Thank you very much for all your questions. If you'd like to learn more, please visit our website. We have additional information on our website at quorum.com. You'll see onQ RE announced there on our website. There are data sheets. There are additional product reviews and other things that could be of interest to you if you're interested in finding out more. So I would encourage you to come to quorum.com and check out onQ Ransomware Edition. Thank you very much for your attendance. Have a great day.